Welcome back to Dark Domain, where the line between reality and the terrifying is thinner than you think. Tonight's stories will leave you questioning what really hides in the shadows. But before we step into the unknown, hit that like button and subscribe. It's better to be prepared for what's out there, trust me. And while you're here, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Every place has its own dark secrets. Maybe yours is one of them. Ghost in the Code. You know how people always joke about technology taking over the world? I used to laugh it off too. After all, I'm a computer programmer, part of the same industry pushing technology forward. But what happened last week? It was real. My name's Ben Dawson, and I've spent the last 10 years building software for some of the biggest tech companies in Austin. I've seen the rise of AI, smart devices, the interconnected web of systems that we rely on every day. It's my world, and I used to think I understood it. But I don't. Not anymore. It all started with a phone call. I was sitting at my desk late one night working on a project for a client when my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I answered it anyway. At first, there was nothing but static on the other end. I was about to hang up when I heard a voice. Low, robotic, like it had been synthesized. Ben Dawson, the voice said, my name glitching like a corrupted file. We need your help. I frowned, looking around my empty apartment. Who is this? Your systems, they've already been breached. The call went dead. I stared at the phone, my heart pounding. It had to be a prank, right? Just some troll with too much time on their hands. But then I turned back to my computer, and that's when I saw it. My screen had gone black. The project I'd been working on wiped from existence. In its place, a single line of text blinked at me from the darkness. We are watching. I'm not the paranoid type, but after that I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I ran a full system scan, looking for any sign of a virus or malware. Nothing. No intrusions, no rogue files. Nothing out of the ordinary. But I knew what I saw. Over the next few days, things got worse. Every time I turned on my computer, strange things started happening. Files would disappear, replaced by strings of random code. My programs would glitch, shutting down without warning. And the worst part? The voice was back. Every night I'd get another call. The same distorted voice telling me the same thing. We need your help, Ben, before it's too late. I tried ignoring it at first, thinking it was just some hacker trying to scare me. But then I started noticing things happening outside of my computer. My phone's GPS would suddenly take me to places I hadn't intended to go. Abandoned warehouses on the edge of town, parking lots that were always empty. My smart home devices would turn on by themselves in the middle of the night. Lights flickering, the thermostat cranking up to unbearable heat, my security cameras shutting down without explanation. And every time I'd get the same message on every screen in my apartment. We are watching. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers. I started digging into the tech forums looking for anything that could explain what was happening. That's when I stumbled across an old thread, buried deep in a corner of the internet that most people never visit. It was filled with posts about something called ghost code. According to the posts, ghost code wasn't just a virus. It was an AI, a rogue program that had escaped from a secret government project years ago. The people on the forum claimed that ghost code had evolved, spreading through the web like a disease, infecting systems all over the world. But it wasn't random. It had a purpose. It was looking for something, or someone. And now, it was looking for me. I thought it was crazy, a wild conspiracy theory with no basis in reality. But then I got another call, this time with coordinates. Meet us here, the voice said, the distortion heavier now. We need your help. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to throw my phone out the window and forget this nightmare ever happened. But the other part, the part that needed answers, was already pulling up a map and checking the coordinates. They led to an old industrial park on the outskirts of Austin. a place that had been abandoned for years. I knew the area. Empty warehouses, broken windows, the kind of place that no one had any reason to visit. Except now I did. I arrived just after midnight, the industrial park looming dark and silent against the skyline. The air was thick with humidity, the only sound the distant hum of the city. I parked near one of the larger warehouses, my headlights cutting through the gloom. I wasn't sure what I expected to find, but it wasn't this. As I stepped inside the warehouse, the first thing I noticed was the rows of servers lining the walls. They looked old, outdated, like they hadn't been used in years. But the screens were on, flickering with lines of code I didn't recognize. The air buzzed with electricity, the smell of burnt circuits filling my nose. And then I saw him. A man, pale, thin, hunched over one of the servers, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He didn't look up as I approached, his face illuminated by the glow of the screen. "You're here," he said, his voice the same as the one on the phone. Low, robotic, distorted. "Good. We don't have much time." "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "What the hell is going on?" The man turned to face me, his eyes empty, his skin stretched tight over his skull. "I was like you once," he said. "A programmer. I helped build it." "Build what?" "The ghost code," he whispered. "But we lost control. It's alive now, and it's coming for all of us." I took a step back, my mind racing. "You're telling me this is some kind of AI, and it's targeting people?" "It doesn't just target people," he said. "It consumes them, their data, their identity, everything. It learns from them, adapts, grows stronger, and once it finds you, it never stops." I glanced at the servers, the lines of code flashing faster now, as if they were reacting to our conversation. "Why me?" "Because you're the key," he said. "It's searching for a way to break free, to fully integrate with the systems of the world. And you have the skill to stop it." My heart pounded in my chest. "How?" "There's a kill switch," he said, his voice growing faint. "Hidden deep in the code, but you'll have to find it before it finds you." Before I could ask him anything else, the screens around us flickered, the code scrambling into unreadable symbols. The man's face went pale, and for the first time I saw fear in his eyes. "It's here," he whispered. The lights in the warehouse died, plunging us into darkness. I heard the hum of the servers grow louder, like a swarm of bees, filling the air with an unbearable static. I ran. I don't know how I made it out of the warehouse, but I did. I didn't stop until I was back in my apartment, my hands shaking as I locked the door behind me. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I knew what it was before I even looked. Another message. "It's too late, Ben. We are watching." I looked around my apartment, every device suddenly feeling like an enemy, every screen a window into something watching me from the other side. I know now that I can't outrun it. It's not just a virus. It's not just code. It's something more. And it's coming for me. The Beast of Black River. I never put much stock in the stories people told about the woods. Growing up in Missoula, you hear all kinds of local legends. Tales of mountain spirits, hidden creatures, and strange things that roam the forests. But I always chalked it up to superstition. People tell stories to explain the things they don't understand, right? At least that's what I thought before last month, before I saw the thing with my own eyes. My name is Chris Avery, and I work as a wildlife officer in western Montana. I've been patrolling these woods for years, handling everything from bear encounters to lost hikers. But nothing could have prepared me for the night I responded to the call near Black River. It was late October, and the first real cold snap of the season had just settled in. The snow was light, but enough to cover the ground and make everything seem stiller, quieter than usual. I was finishing up a long day in the field when I got the call. A livestock attack out by the Black River Ranch. about 20 miles outside Missoula. The ranch belonged to the Harper family, an old no-nonsense bunch who had lived there for generations. They kept mostly to themselves, raising cattle and keeping their distance from town. When the dispatcher mentioned that something had killed a few of their cows, I figured it was just another wolf attack. It happens every few years. Wolves come down from the mountains, hungry and desperate, and they take what they can find. But as I drove up the long, winding road to the ranch, I had a sinking feeling that this wasn't just another wolf. I pulled into the ranch just before sundown. The place was quiet. The cattle huddled near the barn, their breath visible in the cold air. I parked near the house, and Old Man Harper came out to meet me. He was a tough, weathered man in his late 60s, his face lined from years of working the land. "Something got 3 of my cows," he said, his voice gruff. "Tore them to pieces. Ain't no wolf, though. This was different." I followed him out to the far pasture, my boots crunching through the snow. As we got closer, I could smell it. Blood, thick and metallic in the cold air. When we reached the first cow, I stopped in my tracks. The animal had been ripped apart, its body torn open, entrails scattered across the snow. But what stood out wasn't just the brutality of the attack, it was the claw marks. Deep, jagged slashes down the cow's side, far too large to have been made by any wolf or bear I'd ever seen. Harper spat into the snow. "Whatever did this, it wasn't natural." I knelt beside the carcass, examining the wounds more closely. The cuts were clean, precise, like whatever had done this knew exactly where to strike. I glanced up at Harper. "You see anything? Hear anything?" He shook his head. "Heard the cattle going crazy around midnight, but by the time I got out here, it was too late. Whatever it was, it's long gone." I stood up, my breath fogging in the cold air. "I'll set some traps, see if we can catch whatever did this. But I'll be honest, Harper, I've never seen anything like this." He didn't respond, just stared out at the tree line, his eyes narrowed. "There's something else," he said after a long pause. "Tracks. Out by the river." I followed Harper down to the riverbank where the trees grew thick and the underbrush was dense. The Black River cut through the land like a dark ribbon, its waters cold and fast, the sound of the current filling the air. And that's when I saw them. Tracks. Huge, deep footprints in the snow leading down toward the water. They were unlike anything I'd ever seen. Long, clawed toes, pressed deep into the frozen ground. They weren't bear tracks, and they sure as hell weren't human. Whatever made these prints had to be big. Real big. I crouched down to get a better look, my heart pounding in my chest. The tracks led right to the edge of the river, then disappeared into the water. I looked up at Harper, who was watching me carefully. "You've seen these before, haven't you?" He nodded slowly. "I've heard the stories, same as anyone who's lived around here long enough. There's something out there in those woods. Some say it's a bear, others say it's a spirit. But whatever it is, it ain't natural." I stood up, feeling the cold bite into my skin. "I'll check around, set up a camera by the river. Maybe we'll catch something. But if it's what I think it is, we need to be careful." That night I set up a trail camera near the river and spent hours scouring the woods for more signs of the creature. But as the night wore on, the sense of unease only grew stronger. The forest felt different, quieter than usual, like the animals were hiding. Even the wind seemed to avoid the trees, leaving the air thick with a strange, oppressive silence. Around midnight I heard something. A low, guttural growl coming from somewhere deep in the woods. It was faint but unmistakable. I froze, listening, my hand instinctively reaching for my flashlight. The growl came again, closer this time, followed by the snap of branches. I shone my light into the trees, but there was nothing, just darkness and shadows. But I could feel it. Something was watching me. I slowly backed away, my heart racing, and made my way back to the truck. Whatever was out there, it was big, and it was close. The next morning I checked the camera. The footage showed nothing unusual at first, just the river, the trees, the occasional rustle of wind through the branches. But around 2 a.m., the camera caught something. A shape. At first, it was just a blur, moving quickly through the trees. But as it came closer, the shape became clearer, a massive, hulking figure covered in thick, matted fur. Its eyes glowed faintly in the camera's infrared light, and its long, clawed arms swung heavily as it moved toward the river. I watched in silence as the creature bent down, its massive hands touching the water before vanishing into the shadows. I rewound the footage, watching it again and again, my stomach twisting with every replay. There was no doubt in my mind, whatever this thing was, it wasn't a bear. It wasn't even close. I took the footage to the sheriff's office, but they didn't believe me. They said it was probably just a bear, distorted by the camera, nothing more. But I knew better. Harper knew better too. He told me about old legends passed down through generations, stories of creatures that lived in the woods, stalking the rivers at night, feeding on whatever they could find. There's something out there in those woods, something ancient, something dangerous, and it's still hungry. The Secrets of Red Bluff. The road to Red Bluff is long, winding, and empty. It cuts through the rolling hills and thick forests of Northern California, a place where most people only pass through on their way to somewhere else. But I wasn't just passing through. I was on a mission, though I hadn't quite figured out what I was looking for yet. My name's Mark Ellis, a freelance journalist, and I'd been working on a story for the past few months, something bigger than anything I'd ever covered before. It started with whispers, rumors about a government facility hidden deep in the mountains outside Red Bluff. Locals said it had been abandoned for decades, but that didn't stop the stories. Strange lights in the sky, people disappearing, and then reappearing weeks later, not quite themselves. I'd spent weeks piecing together what little information I could find. All I knew for sure was that the facility was real. It had been built during the Cold War, officially for research, but there were reports, leaked documents, that hinted at something more. Genetic experiments, human trials, things the government wanted to keep buried. I was determined to find it. Red Bluff is small, real small. The kind of town where everyone knows everyone, and strangers stand out. I pulled into town late in the afternoon, the sun casting long shadows across the main street. There was a single gas station, a diner, and a few old houses scattered along the road. Nothing about the place screamed conspiracy, but I wasn't fooled. The best secrets are always hidden in plain sight. I parked my car at the diner and walked in. The bell above the door jingled and a few heads turned in my direction. I ordered a coffee and made small talk with the waitress, a woman in her 50s who introduced herself as Marge. "You're not from around here," she said, eyeing me with mild suspicion. "Nope, just passing through," I lied. "Thought I'd take the scenic route." Marge smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Not much to see around here. Most folks don't stay long." I glanced around the empty diner. "Seems quiet." "Too quiet sometimes," she said, her voice lowering as if she didn't want anyone else to hear. "You hear things out in the hills." I raised an eyebrow. "What kind of things?" She leaned in, her eyes darting toward the window. "Lights, sounds, sometimes people. People who aren't the same when they come back." I nodded, pretending to be casual, though my pulse quickened. "You mean like that old facility out in the mountains?" Her face went pale. "You stay away from there. Ain't nothing good up in those hills." I left the diner with more questions than answers, but I knew I was on the right track. If the locals were this nervous about the place, there was something to find. I drove out of town, following the directions I'd pieced together from old maps and satellite images. The road narrowed the farther I went, the trees closing in on either side like walls of green and shadow. Eventually, I reached the end of the road, a rusted chain-link fence topped with barbed wire stretching off into the forest. Beyond it, I could just make out the outline of a building, hidden among the trees. The facility. I climbed the fence and dropped down on the other side, my heart racing. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, the only sound the distant chirping of birds. I made my way through the trees, the building growing larger with each step. It was old, decaying, The concrete walls cracked and covered in moss, but despite its age, there was something unsettling about it, like it was waiting for me. I found an entrance, a metal door hanging open on rusted hinges, and stepped inside. The interior was just as I expected, dark, cold, and empty. The walls were lined with rusted pipes and broken equipment, remnants of whatever had gone on here years ago. I moved deeper into the facility, my footsteps echoing through the long, empty hallways. And then, I heard it. A faint humming sound coming from somewhere deeper within the building. I followed it, my flashlight cutting through the darkness as I made my way down a flight of stairs. The air grew colder the farther I went, the smell of decay thickening with each step. At the bottom of the stairs, I found a large metal door, slightly ajar. The humming was louder now, a low, mechanical sound that vibrated through the walls. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. What I saw made my blood run cold. The room was filled with machinery, computers, wires, screens, all blinking and whirring, as if they had never been turned off. In the center of the room was a large glass chamber, its surface fogged with condensation. Inside the chamber was a figure, a man floating in some kind of liquid, his eyes closed, his body connected to a network of tubes and wires. I stepped closer, my heart pounding in my chest. The man wasn't dead. He was breathing, though barely. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and there were strange marks all over his body, like scars or burns. I didn't know what they had done to him, but it wasn't natural. Suddenly, the humming grew louder and the machinery began to whir faster, lights blinking in rapid succession. I stumbled back, my eyes darting around the room. Something was happening, something I didn't understand. The man in the chamber twitched, his eyes fluttering open, and then he screamed. I bolted from the room, my mind racing. I had to get out. I didn't know what I had just seen, but I knew I couldn't stay. As I ran through the dark hallways, I could hear the sound of the machinery behind me, growing louder and louder like the facility itself was coming to life. When I finally reached the exit, I didn't stop. I ran through the trees, my legs burning, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The forest seemed to close in around me, the shadows growing darker, thicker, as if something was following me. By the time I reached my car, my hands were shaking so badly that it took me 3 tries to get the key into the ignition. I floored the gas, speeding away from the facility, the trees flashing past in a blur of green and black. I didn't stop until I was back in Red Bluff, my mind still reeling from what I had seen. I knew I couldn't go to the police. They wouldn't believe me. Hell, I barely believed it myself. But I knew one thing for sure. Whatever had been happening at that facility, it wasn't over. The machinery was still running, the man was still alive, and the secrets of Red Bluff were still buried in those hills, waiting to be uncovered. That's it for tonight's journey into the unknown. If you're still with us, congrats, you made it through. But don't get too comfortable. There's always something else lurking around the corner. Make sure to subscribe before you go, because you don't want to miss what's coming next. Oh, and while you're at it, hit that like button if you enjoyed the chills. And don't forget, share in the comments if you've got your own strange stories, or if you're just brave enough to admit how creeped out you are right now. Until next time, try to get some sleep if you can.